The wealthy CEO visited hospital to find his ex and saw Triplet who looked exactly like him. Brandon couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't look away from the three small faces that were studying him with innocent curiosity. Have you ever had to raise children alone while the person who should have been there lived a completely different life? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. He walked in the hospital for a routine blood donation checkup, only to freeze at the pediatric ward entrance. There, sitting beside three giggling toddlers who looked like tiny versions of him, was his ex, the woman he abandoned 5 years ago without explanation. And the worst part? She looked up, locked eyes with him, and whispered under her breath, "You weren't supposed to see them." Have you ever run from love only to have it find you again when you least expect it? Brandon Cole thought he had buried his past deep enough. The 37-year-old tech billionaire from Scottsdale had spent 5 years convincing himself that walking away from Amara Davis was the right choice. His family demanded it. His board of directors insisted. His carefully constructed world of corporate success required it. But nothing could have prepared him for this moment. The pediatric ward buzzed with morning activity. Nurses wheeled medication carts down polished corridors while cartoon characters smiled from wall murals. Children's laughter mixed with the steady beep of monitors, creating a soundtrack of hope and healing. Brandon had come here as part of his company's charity initiative, a photo opportunity, really. Shake hands with doctors, write a check, get some positive press coverage. Instead, he stood frozen like a man witnessing his own ghost. 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl, all around 4 years old, all with the same dimpled chin he saw in his mirror every morning, the same hazel eyes that stared back at him from family portraits, the same crooked grin that had charmed investors and broken hearts across 2 coasts. Amara hadn't changed much. Her rich brown skin still glowed under harsh hospital lighting. Those intelligent dark eyes that once looked at him with such love now held something else entirely: panic. She wore pale blue scrubs that had seen too many long shifts, her natural hair pulled back in a practical bun. Even exhausted, even caught off guard, she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "Mommy, who's that man?" The little girl tugged on Amara's sleeve, pointing directly at Brandon. "Nobody, sweetie." Amara's voice carried that same musical quality that used to whisper his name in the darkness. "Just someone Mommy used to know. Used to know." The words hit him harder than any hostile takeover or market crash ever had. The boy sitting closest to Amara, Mason, he heard her call him, looked pale and thin compared to his siblings. A hospital bracelet circled his tiny wrist, and when he moved, Brandon caught sight of surgical scars along his chest. This child was sick, seriously sick. "Excuse me, are you Brandon Cole?" A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Martinez is ready for your tour." Brandon couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't look away from the 3 small faces that were studying him with innocent curiosity. Do you know someone who has experienced this kind of shock? When your past collides with your present so violently that everything you thought you knew gets turned upside down. Tell me in the comments below. What would you do if you discovered you had children you never knew about? Amara stood up slowly, gathering the children closer to her like a mother bird protecting her nest. "We should go," she murmured to them. But as she moved past Brandon toward the elevator, the nurse looked at her chart and said words that stopped everyone cold. "Mrs. Davis, Dr. Martinez needs to speak with you about Mason's bone marrow test results. We may have found a potential donor match, but we need to discuss family medical history first." Brandon's world tilted, because he knew, with the terrible certainty of a man whose carefully built walls were crumbling, that those weren't just any children playing in that waiting room. They were his. She built a fortress around her heart to protect 3 little lives, until the day their father showed up demanding answers she wasn't ready to give. Amara's hands shook as she guided her children toward the family consultation room. 5 years. 5 years of praying this moment would never come. 5 years of protecting Mason, Marcus, and Maya from the truth about their father. 5 years of working double shifts at the hospital, volunteering at disaster relief sites, and building a life that didn't include Brandon Cole. All destroyed in 30 seconds. Mason, sweetie, sit here. She helped her youngest son onto the examination table, his pale skin making the dark circles under his eyes more pronounced. The other two climbed into chairs, their healthy glow a sharp contrast to their brother's fragile appearance. Dr. Martinez entered with Brandon close behind. The sight of him in this sterile room made everything too real. His expensive navy suit looked out of place among the cheerful animal stickers and height charts. Those hazel eyes, the same ones that looked back at her from three small faces every morning, searched her expression with desperate intensity. Mrs. Davis, Mr. Cole has volunteered for additional testing as a potential bone marrow donor for Mason. Dr. Martinez's voice was professional, but Amara caught the meaningful glance he shot between them. Given the genetic markers we've found, we need to establish biological relationships before proceeding. Have you ever had to raise children alone while the person who should have been there lived a completely different life? Amara had spent countless nights wondering if she'd made the right choice. Never filing for child support, never telling Brandon about the pregnancy, never demanding he face what he'd walked away from. You left. The words came out as a fierce whisper, meant only for Brandon's ears. You don't get to waltz back in and play daddy when it's convenient. But Brandon wasn't listening to her anger. His gaze was fixed on Mason, taking in every detail. The surgical scars, the tired eyes, the way the little boy's hand trembled slightly as he reached for a coloring book. How long has he been sick? Brandon's voice cracked on the question. Since he was 2. Amara's professional mask slipped for just a moment. Leukemia. We've tried everything. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. The bone marrow transplant is his last chance. Maya, always the bold one, slid off her chair and walked directly to Brandon. Are you really our daddy? Marcus said you might be, but Mason said daddies don't leave. The silence in the room was deafening. Brandon knelt down to Maya's eye level, and Amara's heart stopped. She saw it then. The moment he truly understood what his absence had cost. Not just her, but these 3 innocent children who deserved so much better. Brandon's voice failed him. Daddy has work to do, Amara said quickly, lifting Maya back in her chair. Dr. Martinez, what do we need to do for the testing? But Dr. Martinez was studying his chart with a frown. Mrs. Davis, I need to be direct with you. Mason's condition has worsened since last week. Without a compatible donor in the next few weeks, we're looking at. He glanced at the children and left the sentence unfinished. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Brandon stood up slowly, his businessman's composure cracking completely. Test my blood. Test everything. Whatever he needs. The testing process takes time, Dr. Martinez warned, and we'll need complete family medical histories for both parents. Both parents. Amara closed her eyes, feeling the walls she'd built around her heart beginning to crumble. There's something else, Dr. Martinez continued, his voice gentle but firm. Given the urgency of Mason's condition and the genetic complexity of bone marrow matching, we may need to test other family members as well. Siblings, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. Brandon's face went white, because testing his family meant exposing everything. It meant his mother, his brother Derek, his entire corporate board discovering that he had 3 children with a woman they'd paid to disappear. It meant choosing between his son's life and the empire he'd built on lies. 5 years ago, he chose his family's money over her love. Now, he had to choose between his reputation and his son's life. The hotel suite felt like a war room. Brandon paced between floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Atlanta's skyline, while his phone buzzed with increasingly hostile messages from Scottsdale. His mother, his brother Derek, the board of directors, all demanding explanations for why their golden boy was suddenly getting tested as a bone marrow donor in Georgia. He lied, of course, told them it was for a business associate's child, corporate charity at its finest. But lies had a way of coming apart when lives hung in the balance. You can't be serious about this. Derek's voice crackled through the video call, his face filling Brandon's laptop screen. At 42, Derek had their father's sharp features and their mother's cold calculation. Do you understand what you're risking? The Jackson deal alone is worth $200 million. If they find out you have illegitimate children with some. Don't. Brandon's voice carried a warning that made Derek pause. Don't you dare finish that sentence. The testing had taken all morning. Blood draws, cheek swabs, extensive medical questionnaires that asked about every illness, every genetic marker, every family secret going back 3 generations. Brandon had answered honestly for the first time in years, watching nurses label vial after vial of his blood with Mason's case number. His son. The words still felt foreign, terrifying, and absolutely right all at once. The preliminary results should be ready by tonight, Dr. Martinez had explained. But I need you both to understand, bone marrow matching is incredibly complex. Even between biological parents and children, the chances are roughly 25%. 25%. Those odds had followed Brandon back to his hotel like a haunting refrain. When have you had to choose between what others expected and what your heart knew was right? Brandon stared at the contract Derek had overnight, a legal document that would officially transfer Brandon's voting shares to their mother's foundation if he became involved in any scandal that could damage the family's reputation. They knew. Somehow, they'd always known this day might come. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mason asking for the tall man who visited today. Says he wants to show you his Lego castle. Hey, Amara. Even in crisis, even with years of hurt between them, she was giving him this chance. Another buzz, this time from Derek. Mother is flying in tonight. End this now, or we end it for you. Brandon looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. Somewhere out there, in a small apartment he'd never seen, 3 children were probably getting ready for bed. Mason was probably taking his medications, fighting a battle no 4-year-old should have to fight. Maya was probably asking 1,000 questions about why the tall man had such sad eyes. Marcus was probably being the protective big brother, the way Brandon himself had never learned to be. 5 years ago, he'd chosen the easy path, the safe path, the path that kept his family's money flowing and his reputation intact. But paths had a way of leading you back to where you started, whether you were ready or not. I'm not the kind of man who takes a woman's first experience from a place of desperation. He told Amara all those years ago in a different hospital room when she tried to sign up as a surrogate to pay for her mother's cancer treatment. Now he had to decide what kind of man he was when his own child's life hung in the balance. Brandon closed the laptop, cutting off Derek's protests mid-sentence. Some conversations couldn't happen over video calls. Some choices couldn't be made from a distance. He was going to see his son. The man who destroyed their love was now the only one who could save their child. And he had no idea he was about to become an uncle. Derek Cole stepped out of his rental car like a man preparing for battle. The modest apartment complex in East Atlanta was a world away from the Scottsdale mansions and corporate boardrooms where he usually conducted his wars. But this particular fight required a personal touch. He found Brandon sitting on a playground bench, watching 3 children climb jungle gyms and race down slides in the fading evening light. The scene looked almost domestic, if you ignored the tension radiating from every line of Brandon's body. Touching, Derek said, settling beside his younger brother without invitation. Very Norman Rockwell, except for the part where you're about to destroy everything our family built. Brandon didn't look away from the children. Our family destroyed itself a long time ago. I'm just finally admitting it. Mason was the smallest of the 3, but he kept up with his siblings with fierce determination. Every few minutes, he'd glance toward the bench where his father sat, as if making sure the tall man hadn't disappeared again. The trust in that look made Brandon's chest tight. Do you remember what I told you 5 years ago? Derek's voice carried the same smooth authority that had closed billion-dollar deals and ended careers. About that girl and her situation? Of course Brandon remembered. Derek had presented it like a business proposal. Problem: Brandon was getting emotionally attached to a woman beneath their social class. Solution: convince her to disappear before she became a permanent complication. You said she took the money. Brandon's voice was steady, but Derek caught the dangerous undertone. I said she would take the money. I was protecting you from making the biggest mistake of your life. Derek pulled out his phone, scrolling to an old email chain. I had our lawyers draft the paperwork. A clean break. She disappears, you move on, everyone wins. Except she never took it. Derek's pause lasted a beat too long. She was smarter than I gave her credit for. The children's laughter carried across the playground, but Brandon heard something else in Derek's tone. Something that made him finally turn away from his kids to study his brother's face. You thought I took their money? The voice came from behind them. Amara stood there in her scrubs, having just finished her shift. Her eyes held a combination of exhaustion and fury that made Derek unconsciously lean back. I would have died before taking a penny from people who saw me as a problem to solve. Have you ever been misjudged by someone you loved? The way Amara looked at Brandon in that moment, like he was a stranger wearing a familiar face, cut deeper than any business betrayal ever had. Amara, I never knew. Brandon started. Of course you didn't know. Her voice carried 5 years of buried pain. You were already gone. Your brother made sure of that. Derek stood up, straightening his tie like armor. I did what was necessary, what our father would have done, what any rational person would do when their family's reputation was at stake. Reputation? Amara laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Your reputation was worth more than 3 children growing up without their father. The playground had grown quiet. Mason, Maya, and Marcus had stopped playing, sensing the adult tension even if they couldn't understand it. They moved closer to their mother like small soldiers protecting their general. Derek looked at the children for the first time, really looked at them. Brandon watched his brother's face change as recognition hit. The dimpled chins, the hazel eyes, the stubborn set of their jaws that screamed Cole family genetics. Jesus, Derek vi spirit. Mommy, why is everyone angry? Maya's small voice cut through the tension. Derek's expression hardened again, businessman's calculation replacing momentary shock. This changes nothing. If anything, it makes the situation more dangerous. Do you understand what the media will do with this story? Tech billionaires' secret children. Our stock price will tank. The Jackson merger will collapse. Everything we've worked for will be meaningless if Mason dies, Brandon finished quietly. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Derek stared at his brother, then at the 3 children who were watching this adult drama with wide, uncertain eyes. There might be another option, Derek said finally. I'll agree to testing, but only if you sign over your voting shares and agree to never see these children again after the medical situation is resolved. Brandon felt Amara's sharp intake of breath behind him. But it was Mason who spoke up, his young voice cutting through the grown-up negotiations with devastating simplicity. Are you going to leave again, Daddy? Some truths can only be spoken in darkness, when pride sleeps and hearts remember how to bleed. The hospital cafeteria at 3 a.m. was a graveyard of abandoned coffee cups and forgotten conversations. Amara sat alone at a corner table, her head in her hands, when Brandon found her. She'd been crying. He could tell by the way she kept her face turned away from the harsh vending machine lights. The other children are asleep in the family room, he said quietly, settling into the chair across from her. Mason's resting comfortably after his treatment. She nodded without looking up. They'd spent the day in a nightmare of medical tests and family consultations. Derek had submitted to testing with the enthusiasm of a man scheduling his own execution. The preliminary results wouldn't be ready until morning, but Dr. Martinez's carefully neutral expression hadn't been encouraging. I keep thinking about that night, Amara said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The night you left. I waited for you to call, to text, to send some sign that what we had meant something. Brandon's chest tightened. He remembered that night too. Pacing his hotel room in New Orleans while his phone buzzed with increasingly desperate messages from her. Messages he'd been too much of a coward to answer. Derek told me you'd taken the money, he said. Said you'd signed papers agreeing never to contact me again. I never saw any papers. Never saw any money. She finally looked up, and the pain in her dark eyes nearly broke him. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you disappeared. I called your office, but your assistant said you were unavailable indefinitely and couldn't take personal calls. When have you had to choose between protecting someone and telling the truth? Brandon had convinced himself he was protecting her by staying away, that his family's threats and corporate pressures would only hurt her more if he dragged her into his world. "I was terrified," he admitted. "Terrified I'd ruin you the way my family ruins everything they touch. You were so pure, so good. You volunteered at disaster sites and worked double shifts to help people. I was just some rich kid who'd never earned anything real in his life." Amara's laugh was bitter. "So you decided for both of us. You decided I couldn't handle your world, couldn't fight for what we had. You decided our love wasn't worth the risk." The words hit like physical blows because they were absolutely true. "I convinced myself you'd be better off without me," he whispered. "That you'd find someone who deserved you. Someone who could give you the life you wanted without all the complications. The life I wanted was with you." Her voice broke on the words. "I didn't care about your money or your family's approval. I cared about the man who held me during thunderstorms and made me laugh when I was exhausted from studying. The man who saw strength in me when I only saw struggle." Brandon reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact sent electricity through both of them, muscle memory of touches that had once meant everything. "Show me," he said quietly. "Show me what I missed. Show me who they are." Amara pulled out her phone, scrolling to a photo album labeled "My Heart." The first picture made Brandon's breath catch. 3 tiny newborns in the NICU, so small they looked like dolls. Amara exhausted, but radiant beside their incubators. They were born at 34 weeks. "I was alone, scared, working 2 jobs, and trying to finish nursing school." She swiped to the next photo. "First steps. Maya walked first, of course. Always has to be the leader." More pictures. Birthday parties with homemade cakes. Christmas morning in a tiny apartment with discount store presents. Halloween costumes that looked hand-sewn with love. Beach trips and park adventures and bedtime stories. 5 years of life. 5 years of moments he'd never get back. "They ask about you sometimes," Amara said softly. "Especially Mason. He's always been more sensitive than the others. He'd see other kids with their dads and get this look, like he knew something was missing but couldn't name it." Brandon's vision blurred. "I'm so sorry. I'm so damn sorry. But sorry wouldn't give him back those 5 years. Sorry wouldn't cure Mason's leukemia or erase the nights Amara had faced everything alone." His phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Test results tomorrow at 10 a.m. Mother's plane lands at 6. End this now or face the consequences." Brandon showed Amara the message. She read it twice, her expression hardening. "What will you choose?" she asked. "When the results come back? When your family demands you walk away again?" Brandon looked at the photos still glowing on her phone screen. 3 children who carried his DNA, his stubborn chin, his hazel eyes. 3 children who deserved better than a father who ran when things got complicated. "I'm not walking away this time," he said. "Whatever the test results show, whatever my family threatens, whatever it costs me, I'm not walking away." Amara studied his face in the dim cafeteria lighting, searching for cracks in his resolve. "Mason's surgery is scheduled for next week if we find a compatible donor," she said finally. "Win or lose, this ends then. After that, we go back to our separate lives." But even as she said the words, both of them knew some endings were really beginnings in disguise, and some truths, once spoken, could never be taken back. She watched him sign away his empire to save their son, and for the first time in 5 years, she remembered why she fell in love with him. The conference room at Atlanta General felt more like a courtroom than a medical facility. Legal documents covered the polished table while Brandon stared at the pen in his hand like it was a loaded weapon. His signature on these papers would transfer 60% of his voting shares to the Cole Family Foundation, effectively ending his control over the company he'd built from nothing. Derek sat across from him, perfectly pressed suit and satisfied smile, making him look like a shark who'd finally cornered his prey. "Just sign, Brandon. Mason gets his surgery, you get to play daddy for a few weeks, and then life goes back to normal." Normal. As if anything about this situation could ever be called normal. Dr. Martinez cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, I need to stress the urgency here. Mason's white cell count dropped again overnight. Without a compatible donor in the next 72 hours, we're looking at a very different conversation. Amara stood by the window, still wearing yesterday's scrubs, exhaustion written in every line of her body. She hadn't left the hospital since Mason's latest relapse, catching fragments of sleep in waiting room chairs and surviving on vending machine coffee. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, not turning around. "I never asked you to sacrifice everything." But Brandon was already writing his name across the bottom of each page. Years of corporate training told him to read every clause, negotiate every term, protect his interests. Instead, he signed like a man jumping off a cliff, trusting that love would teach him how to fly. What's the biggest sacrifice you've made for love or family? Brandon had spent his entire adult life building walls around his heart, convincing himself that business success could fill the empty spaces where real relationships should live. Now he was tearing those walls down with his own hands. "There," he said, sliding the documents across to Derek. "It's done." Derek's smile faded as he realized his brother wasn't devastated by the loss. If anything, Brandon looked lighter, freer, like he'd been carrying a weight he was finally allowed to put down. "The surgery is scheduled for Thursday morning," Dr. Martinez announced. "Derek, your compatibility results came back at 92%. It's not perfect, but it's our best option. 92%. Better odds than anyone had dared hope for." Brandon found himself at Mason's bedside an hour later, watching his son sleep. The boy's face was pale against the hospital pillows, but peaceful, innocent, trusting in the way only children could trust. "Daddy." Mason's eyes fluttered open. "Are you really going to stay this time?" The question hit Brandon harder than signing away his fortune had. "Every day for the rest of your life," he promised. "Even when you're old enough to think I'm embarrassing and you don't want me around." Mason giggled weakly. "Maya says you have sad eyes." "Do you?" Brandon thought about that. "I used to, but I think they're getting happier." "Good. Mommy has sad eyes sometimes too, but she smiles when she thinks we're not looking." Children saw everything adults try to hide. Mason had spent 4 years watching his mother carry the weight of single parenthood, working multiple jobs to keep their small family afloat, never complaining, but never quite hiding the exhaustion either. "Your mommy is the strongest person I know," Brandon said. "Will you tell her that? She forgets sometimes." Before Brandon could answer, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from his assistant in Scottsdale. "Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow. They're voting to remove you as CEO. Derek's recommendation." Brandon deleted the message without reading it twice. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Some victories cost more than they were worth. But this, sitting beside his son's hospital bed, making promises he intended to keep, this felt like winning everything that actually mattered. "Daddy." Mason's voice was getting sleepy again. "Will you be here when I wake up from my surgery?" "I'll be the first face you see," Brandon promised. And for the first time in 5 years, he meant every word. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, matching the anxiety that hung over the pediatric ward like fog. Mason had been prepped for surgery since dawn, his small body dwarfed by the hospital gown and pre-op medications making him drowsy. But when the transport team arrived to take him to the operating room, Derek was nowhere to be found. "Sir, we need to locate the donor immediately," the head nurse told Dr. Martinez. "The patient is already sedated. We have a very narrow window here." Brandon's blood turned to ice water. He grabbed his phone, calling Derek's number again and again, straight to voicemail. Then security found him. Derek Cole was unconscious in his hotel room, paramedics working frantically over his still form. Empty pill bottles scattered across the nightstand told a story that made Brandon's world tilt sideways. "Overdose," the paramedic reported grimly. "We're getting a pulse, but he's unresponsive. No way he's donating anything today." Brandon stared at his brother's pale face and felt something break inside his chest. Not grief, something deeper. The final death of the illusion that family meant love, that blood guaranteed loyalty. Derek had sabotaged himself rather than save Mason's life. As the ambulance disappeared into Atlanta traffic, Brandon realized they were back to square one. "No donor. No options. No time. Unless. Dr. Martinez, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Test everyone. Amara's family, distant relatives, anyone who might be a match. And keep testing me. Run every compatibility panel you have. Mr. Cole, we've already established that you're not. Test me again, Brandon interrupted. Sometimes miracles hide in the details. But miracles, as it turned out, sometimes came disguised as phone calls from people you'd written off years ago. Brandon, the voice on his phone was older, shakier than he remembered. This is your Aunt Helen. Derek called me yesterday, told me about the children, about Mason being sick. Aunt Helen, his father's sister, the one the family had disowned for marrying beneath her station. I'm flying to Atlanta tonight, she continued. I want to be tested as a donor. And Brandon? I'm bringing your cousin Michael with me. He's a perfect blood type match for your father's side of the family. Sometimes the family that saves you isn't the one you were born into. Sometimes it's the one you thought you'd lost forever. When the universe closes one door, sometimes you have to break down the wall, even if it costs you everything you have left. The ICU hummed with machines keeping Derek alive, while Mason fought for his life 3 floors below. Brandon sat between two worlds, his brother who had betrayed him and his son who needed him, both hanging in the balance of decisions made years ago. His vitals are stabilizing, the ICU nurse reported, checking Derek's monitors. But the drug combination in his system, it's like he was trying to make himself sick, not kill himself. That realization hit Brandon like a physical blow. Derek a tenté de suicide. He'd sabotaged his own health to avoid donating bone marrow to Mason, his own nephew. The calculation was so cold, so deliberately cruel, that Brandon felt sick. Amara appeared in the doorway, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. Any word from your aunt? Her flight was delayed by storms. She won't be here until morning. Brandon's voice carried the weight of time running out. Mason can't wait that long. They both knew what Dr. Martinez had told them an hour ago. Mason's body was shutting down. Without the bone marrow transplant in the next 12 hours, his immune system would collapse completely. They were watching a 4-year-old boy slowly slip away while adults played games with his life. When have you had to swallow your pride for someone you love? Amara had been thinking about this moment for 2 days, ever since the doctor started discussing alternative options. There was one person who might be a match. One person she'd sworn never to contact again. I need to make a phone call, she said quietly. Brandon caught her hand as she turned to leave. Amara, whatever you're thinking. My mother. The words came out flat, emotionless. I haven't spoken to her since I was 16, but she's the only blood relative I have left. If there's any chance she could be a match for Mason. The story came out in fragments. Amara's mother had abandoned her at 16 when she got pregnant with another man's child, left her to finish high school alone, work her way through nursing school, build a life from nothing. For years, Amara had convinced herself she was better off without the woman who gave birth to her, but never learned how to be a mother. She lives about 2 hours outside Atlanta, Amara continued. I looked her up once when Maya was born, just curious, I guess. But I never called. What if she says no? Amara's laugh was bitter. Then Mason dies, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I was too proud to ask the woman who threw me away to save the grandson she's never met. The phone call lasted exactly 3 minutes. Brandon watched Amara's face cycle through emotions. Hope, anger, desperation, resignation. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. She'll come, Amara said, but she wants something in return. Of course she did. Brandon had learned that everyone wanted something. The question was always what price they demanded for basic human decency. Money, custody. Amara's voice broke on the word. She wants full custody of all 3 children. Says I'm unfit to raise them, that I'm too young, too poor, too black. The racial slur hung in the air like poison. Brandon felt rage building in his chest. Not just at Amara's mother, but at every person who had ever made her feel less than the extraordinary woman she was. She can't have them. She already filed paperwork with family court. Has a lawyer, claims I've been living in poverty, forcing the children to live in unsafe conditions. Amara pulled out a legal document that had been served that morning. She's asking for emergency custody based on Mason's medical crisis and my inability to provide adequate care. Brandon read the filing with growing horror. Amara's mother had painted a picture of neglect and instability that bore no resemblance to reality. But family court judges saw hundreds of cases like this every month. Without time to investigate thoroughly, they often erred on the side of removing children from allegedly dangerous situations. "This is blackmail," Brandon said. "This is motherhood," Amara corrected. "She gets tested for compatibility, helps save Mason's life if she's a match, and then takes all 3 children away from me forever." The choice was impossible. Let Mason die to keep the family together, or save his life and lose him anyway. There has to be another way. But as they sat in that sterile waiting room, watching other families navigate their own crises, both of them knew that sometimes love meant making choices that destroyed you. Sometimes saving someone meant losing everything else. Amara's mother arrived at the hospital like a storm front, all sharp edges and barely contained violence. Patricia Williams looked older than her 52 years, with graying hair pulled back severely and clothes that spoke of middle-class respectability built on judgment and bitterness. "So you're the father," she said, looking Brandon up and down like he was something distasteful she'd found on her shoe. "Rich white boy who got my daughter pregnant and ran off." Typical. Brandon bit back his first 3 responses. This woman held Mason's life in her hands, regardless of her personal opinions about interracial relationships or absent fathers. "Mrs. Williams, we appreciate you coming. The doctors are ready to begin testing immediately." "Dr. Williams," she corrected coldly. "I have a doctorate in social work. Unlike some people, I believe in finishing what I start." The barb was clearly aimed at Amara, who stood silent beside Brandon like a woman preparing for execution. "The children," Patricia continued. "Where are they now?" "Maya and Marcus are in the family room with volunteers. Mason is dying because his mother couldn't provide adequate medical care." Patricia's voice was clinical, professional. The voice of someone who made her living judging other people's parenting. "I've reviewed his medical history. Multiple hospital visits, delayed treatments, charity care applications. Textbook case of medical neglect." "That's not fair," Brandon started, but Amara placed a warning hand on his arm. "She's right," Amara said quietly. "I couldn't afford the best care. I did the best I could with what I had, but it wasn't enough." "It was everything," Brandon said fiercely. "You worked 3 jobs, went without food so they could eat, gave up everything for those children. Don't let her twist that into something ugly." But Patricia Williams smiled like a shark scenting blood in the water. "Save the romantic speeches for someone who cares. I'm here to clean up the mess my daughter made." Again, as she walked toward the testing lab, her final words followed them like a curse. "Enjoy saying goodbye to those children. Because once I save that boy's life, you'll never see any of them again." The woman who abandoned her daughter 16 years ago now wanted to steal her grandchildren, and the law was on her side. The family courtroom felt like a battlefield dressed up in mahogany and marble. Judge Patricia Harrison, a woman who'd spent 20 years making impossible decisions about broken families, sat behind the bench like a referee in a fight where everybody lost. Amara's mother had hired the kind of lawyer who wore expensive suits and specialized in character assassination. Martin Kessler looked like he'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom, all polished shoes and predatory confidence. "Your Honor," Kessler began, "we're dealing with a clear case of parental negligence. My client, Dr. Patricia Williams, is requesting emergency custody of 3 minor children whose mother has repeatedly failed to provide adequate medical care. Have you ever felt the legal system working against you when you needed it most?" Amara sat at the defendant's table with a court-appointed attorney who looked fresh out of law school, watching her entire world get dissected by strangers who'd never lost sleep worrying about rent money or held a sick child through the night. The evidence Patricia presented painted a devastating picture. Hospital bills and collections, Medicaid applications, photos of their small apartment with secondhand furniture and peeling paint around the windows. Mason's delayed diagnosis because Amara couldn't afford the specialist visits that might have caught his leukemia earlier. The respondent, MS. Davis is a 26-year-old single mother working multiple jobs to support 3 children, Kessler continued. She has no college degree, no stable housing, no support system. These children deserve better. No college degree. The words hit Amara like physical blows. She'd finished nursing school while pregnant with triplets, working nights at a diner, and weekends cleaning offices. She had her RN license, specialized training in pediatric emergency care, and 5 years of experience saving other people's children. But none of that mattered in a courtroom where poverty was treated like a crime. Brandon's lawyer tried to present character witnesses, Amara's co-workers, the children's teachers, neighbors who'd watched her sacrifice everything for her kids. But family court moved fast, and Patricia Williams had come prepared for war. Furthermore, Your Honor, Kessler produced another document. Genetic testing has confirmed that Mr. Brandon Cole is the biological father of these children. Mr. Cole abandoned Ms. Davis during her pregnancy and has had no contact with these children until this medical crisis arose. The implication was clear. Deadbeat dad shows up with money and promises, but where was he when Amara was struggling alone? Brandon stood up despite his lawyer's warning gesture. Your Honor, I take full responsibility for my absence from their lives. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. These children belong with their mother. Judge Harrison looked tired. She'd probably heard similar speeches in a dozen cases that week. Mr. Cole, your recent involvement is noted. However, the immediate concern is the medical welfare of Mason Davis. Dr. Williams has tested as a compatible bone marrow donor. Time is critical. That was when Patricia played her final card. Your Honor, I'm prepared to donate bone marrow to save my grandson's life. But I cannot in good conscience allow these children to return to an unstable environment after this crisis passes. I'm requesting immediate temporary custody pending a full investigation. The courtroom went silent except for the sound of Amara's quiet sobbing. Dr. Williams, you understand that accepting custody would make you responsible for 3 children indefinitely? I raised 1 daughter successfully, Patricia replied, not looking at Amara. I can certainly manage 3 grandchildren. Unlike their current guardian, I have stable housing, adequate income, and no history of medical neglect. How far would you go to protect your children from toxic family members? Amara wanted to scream that her mother's successful parenting had consisted of abandonment and emotional abuse. That stable income didn't equal love, and adequate housing didn't make someone a good parent. But Mason was dying 3 floors above them, and this monster was the only person who could save him. Judge Harrison reviewed the paperwork one final time. Given the medical emergency and the concerning evidence of financial instability, I'm granting temporary custody to Dr. Patricia Williams effective immediately following the completion of medical procedures. Social services will conduct a full investigation over the next 60 days. The gavel fell like a death sentence. As court officers approached to escort the children to their grandmother's custody, Amara felt Brandon's hand slip into hers. Their fingers intertwined desperately, 2 people drowning together in a system that reduced love to legal documents and measured worth in bank account balances. We can't lose them, she whispered against his mouth when he pulled her close in the courthouse bathroom afterward. We just found each other again. The kiss was desperate, hungry, full of grief and rage and need. Clothes pushed aside, whispered reassurances, urgent connection in a world falling apart around them. They made love like people who might never get another chance, bodies seeking solace that words couldn't provide. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones, ready to turn their family's crisis into entertainment for the evening news. But in that stolen moment, pressed against the cold tile wall with Brandon's forehead against hers, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She wasn't facing this alone anymore. Even if they lost everything else, they had each other. And sometimes, that had to be enough to start rebuilding a world from ashes. Sometimes the only way to save your family is to destroy the lies that built it. even when those lies protected the people you love most. The emergency court hearing was called for 6 a.m. before regular business hours because Mason's condition had taken another turn for the worse overnight. Brandon sat in the courthouse parking lot with documents spread across his dashboard, phone pressed to his ear as his private investigator delivered news that would change everything. "You were right to be suspicious about the timing," the investigator said. Patricia Williams filed the custody paperwork 3 days before she agreed to be tested as a donor. She planned this whole thing, but that wasn't the worst of it. Derek's overdose wasn't random either. Hospital security footage shows Patricia Williams visiting his hotel room the night before he was found unconscious. She slipped something into his drink during what looked like a casual conversation at the hotel bar. Brandon's blood ran cold. "She poisoned my brother to prevent him from donating?" Looks that way. She wanted Brandon to suffer like she did when their father left her all those years ago. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Patricia Williams wasn't trying to save Mason. She was using his illness as leverage to steal the grandchildren she saw as meal tickets and revenge against the daughter who dared to succeed without her. Inside the courthouse, Amara sat with her court-appointed lawyer, watching Patricia Williams testify about her qualifications as a guardian. The woman spoke with clinical precision about child development and stable environments, painting herself as the responsible adult in a situation created by irresponsible young people. "Dr. Williams," Judge Harrison asked, "you understand that bone marrow donation is a significant medical procedure. Are you prepared to undergo this process regardless of the custody outcome?" Patricia hesitated for just a moment, barely noticeable unless you were watching for it. "Of course, Your Honor. My grandson's life is the priority." That hesitation was everything. Brandon burst through the courtroom doors with his lawyer close behind, carrying a folder thick with evidence. "Your Honor, we request an immediate recess. New evidence has come to light regarding Dr. Williams' motives and actions. When have you ever had to choose between protecting someone and telling the truth?" The next hour unfolded like a legal thriller. Security footage showing Patricia Williams at Derek's hotel. Financial records proving she'd researched Brandon's net worth before agreeing to testing. Phone records showing she'd contacted family court about custody procedures before Mason's condition worsened. Most damning of all, the medical report showing Patricia Williams had lied about her compatibility as a donor. She wasn't a match for Mason. She'd bribed a lab technician to falsify the results, planning to disappear once she had legal custody of the children. "Dr. Williams." Judge Harrison's voice carried the chill of absolute authority. "Do you have an explanation for these discrepancies?" Patricia's mask finally slipped. Years of bitterness and resentment poured out in a torrent of accusations. How dare Amara succeed where she had failed? How dare these children have opportunities she'd never been offered? How dare Brandon Cole's family treat her daughter like dirt and then expect forgiveness? "I gave birth to her," Patricia screamed. "I raised her. Those children are my blood, and I deserve better than watching my daughter struggle while rich white people play house with my grandchildren." The courtroom erupted. Security moved to restrain Patricia as she lunged toward Amara. Years of suppressed rage finally exploding into violence. But Judge Harrison had heard enough. "Emergency custody is hereby revoked and returned to Amara Davis effective immediately. Dr. Patricia Williams will be held in contempt of court pending investigation for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted poisoning." As Patricia was led away in handcuffs, she screamed one final threat. "You'll never find another donor. I made sure of that. Your son is going to die because you chose them over me." The words echoed in the suddenly quiet courtroom like a curse. Because Patricia Williams had been right about one thing: Mason was out of time. Without a compatible donor in the next few hours, they would lose him. Brandon pulled Amara close as they watched their brief victory turn to ash. They'd won the custody battle, but might still lose the war that mattered most. "There has to be another option," Amara whispered. But sometimes, love meant facing the possibility that wanting something desperately didn't make it possible. Sometimes, despite everything you sacrificed and fought for, the universe said no. And sometimes, miracles came from the last place you expected to find them. Brandon's phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Cole? This is Dr. Sarah Chun at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I understand you have a son who needs an emergency bone marrow transplant. I have a patient here, a 7-year-old girl named Emma, who's been in remission for 2 years. Her parents want to donate her excess bone marrow to another child. The compatibility markers are promising. Sometimes angels wore scrubs and worked night shifts, making calls that saved lives across state lines. Sometimes hope arrived in the voice of a stranger who understood that healing meant sharing whatever you had to give. How soon can you get here? Dr. Chin asked. Brandon looked at Amara, saw the desperate hope blooming in her eyes, and knew they were about to discover what miracles really looked like. We're on our way. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, 3 adults discovered what love actually costs, and whether they were brave enough to pay the price. The pediatric intensive care unit at 4 a.m. was a cathedral of beeping monitors and whispered prayers. Mason lay unconscious on the operating table, while medical teams from 2 hospitals coordinated the most complex procedure any of them had attempted. Bone marrow from a 7-year-old donor in Philadelphia was being transported by emergency medical helicopter while surgeons in Atlanta prepared to save a 4-year-old boy's life. Brandon stood beside Amara in the observation deck, both of them still wearing yesterday's clothes, holding each other upright through exhaustion and terror. Through the glass, they could see Dr. Martinez reviewing final preparations with a team of specialists who'd been assembled from across the Southeast. The compatibility markers are excellent, Dr. Martinez had explained an hour earlier. 96% match, better than we usually see between siblings. 96%. The number that meant the difference between Mason waking up tomorrow or not waking up at all. Derek had regained consciousness just long enough to demand testing for the transplant. His recovery from Patricia Williams' poisoning nothing short of miraculous. But the damage to his system made him ineligible as a donor. Perhaps the first time his body's rejection of something had actually saved a life. I'm sorry, he'd whisper to Brandon through oxygen tubes and guilt. I'm sorry for everything. Some apologies came too late to matter. Others arrived exactly when forgiveness was possible. What's the most terrifying weight you've ever endured? The surgery took 6 hours. 6 hours of pacing hospital corridors, drinking bad coffee, and watching other families navigate their own crises. Maya and Marcus slept curled together on waiting room chairs while volunteers brought coloring books and juice boxes that nobody touched. Hour 1. Bone marrow extraction from the donor in Philadelphia successful. Transport hélicoptère en route. Hour 2. Mason's body responding well to pre-surgery medications. Vital signs stable. Hour 3. Complications with the transport helicopter. Emergency landing in rural Virginia due to weather. Hour 4. Backup helicopter dispatched. Bone marrow still viable, but time becoming critical. Hour 5. Successful delivery to Atlanta General. Surgery proceeding as planned. Hour 6. The longest silence any of them had ever experienced. He's stable, Dr. Martinez announced, appearing in the waiting room like an angel in surgical scrubs. The transplant was successful. His body is already beginning to accept the new bone marrow. The moment when good news hits after hours of terror feels like being born again. Amara collapsed into Brandon's arms. 5 years of single parenthood and medical fears finally released in sobs that shook her entire body. Can we see him? Brandon asked. He's sleeping off the anesthesia, but yes. Fair warning, he'll be in isolation for several weeks while his immune system rebuilds. It's going to be a long recovery. But long recovery meant recovery. It meant Mason would see his 5th birthday, would start kindergarten, would have a chance to grow up and break hearts and make mistakes and live the full, complicated, beautiful life that every child deserved. In the recovery room, Mason looked smaller than ever among the machines and monitors. But his color was better already, the grayish pallor of illness replaced by the pink flush of healing. Daddy, His voice was barely a whisper, still thick with medication. Did it work? It worked, buddy. You're going to be okay. Good. Mason's eyes fluttered, closed again. I was scared you'd leave if I died. The words hit Brandon harder than any business loss or family betrayal ever had. For years old, fighting for his life, and Mason's biggest fear wasn't death, it was abandonment. I'm never leaving, Brandon promised. Not ever again. We did it, Brandon whispered to Amara later, both of them holding vigil beside Mason's bed. We actually did it. We saved him. No, Amara corrected, her hand finding his in the dim recovery room light. We saved each other, and for the first time in either of their lives, that felt like the beginning of everything rather than the end of anything. Outside Mason's window, Atlanta was waking up to a new day. Somewhere in Philadelphia, a 7-year-old girl named Emma was recovering from her own surgery, probably not fully understanding that her generosity had given another child the gift of life. Somewhere in between, love had proven stronger than fear. Family had triumphed over money, and 3 adults had learned that the best way to find yourself was to lose everything you thought you needed. Some lessons could only be learned in hospital rooms at dawn, when life hung in the balance and love was the only currency that mattered. As Mason slept peacefully, surrounded by machines that promised tomorrow, Amara felt a familiar flutter in her stomach that made her gasp. She wasn't just watching her son recover. She was carrying another Cole baby, conceived during their desperate courthouse encounter when the world was falling apart around them. This time, she wouldn't face pregnancy alone. This time, she had a partner who'd already proven he'd sacrifice everything for their family. But first, she had to find the courage to tell him that their family was about to get bigger again. And some truths, once spoken, could never be taken back. Brandon stared at the pregnancy test like it might explode in his hands. 2 pink lines, clear as day. Amara sat on their hotel bed, watching his face cycle through shock, joy, then pure terror. Say something, she whispered. We're having another baby. His voice cracked. After everything we just went through with Mason, Derek, your mother, we're adding another kid to this chaos? Have you ever gotten news that should make you happy but terrifies you instead? Let us know in the comments. Amara's eyes flashed. Chaos? Is that what you call our family? That's not what I meant. Brandon ran his hands through his hair. It's just timing, Amara. The FBI is breathing down my neck about Derek's embezzlement. My company's under federal investigation. We're broke. And now what? You wanted to get rid of it. The hotel room went silent. Through the thin walls, they could hear the triplets watching cartoons in the adjoining room. Maya's giggle. Luke's commentary about superheroes. Mason's steady breathing, alive, healthy home. No. Brandon's voice was barely audible. God, no. I'm scared, okay? I failed you once. I abandoned you when you needed me most. What if I mess this up again? Amara stood, crossing to the window. Atlanta's skyline stretched before them, lights twinkling like promises. You want to know what scares me? Not you leaving. You staying. What's that supposed to mean? She turned, tears streaming. Staying and resenting me. Staying and wishing you were somewhere else. Staying because you feel guilty, not because you love us. Brandon moved behind her, hands settling on her shoulders. Look at me. She shook her head. Amara, look at me. When she turned, he cupped her face. This close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but also something else. Something that hadn't been there 5 years ago. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you, he said. I left because I was a coward. I chose money over you, status over family, and it nearly cost me everything. His thumb traced her cheek. This baby? It's not chaos. It's a gift, a chance to get it right from the beginning. But the investigation will end. The money problems will get solved. But if I lose you again, if I lose our kids. He shook his head. There's no coming back from that. Amara leaned into his touch. Despite everything, the hospitals, the lawyers, the family drama, he was here. Really here. We're going to be okay, Brandon whispered, forehead against hers. That's when his phone buzzed. FBI Agent Martinez. Brandon's stomach dropped. Don't answer it, Amara said, seeing his expression. I have to. Mr. Cole. Agent Martinez's voice was crisp. We need you to come in for questioning. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. What's this about? Derek Williams. Turns out your brother-in-law's embezzlement scheme goes deeper than we thought, and your name keeps coming up in the financial records. The line went dead. Brandon stared at the phone, then at Amara's worried face. What is it? She asked. They think I was involved in Derek's scheme. Outside, thunder rumbled. The storm was just beginning. What would you do if the FBI suspected you of a crime you didn't commit? Drop your thoughts below. Love conquered family pressure, medical crises, and legal battles. But could it survive the possibility of prison bars between them? The FBI field office felt like a tomb. Brandon sat across from Agent Martinez and Detective Johnson, his lawyer scribbling notes beside him. Somewhere across town, Amara was at her doctor's appointment, getting their new baby checked. Mr. Cole, your signature appears on 12 wire transfers totaling $2.3 million. Agent Martinez slid documents across the metal table. All funds went to offshore accounts controlled by Derek Williams. Brandon studied the papers, his signature, his routing numbers, but he'd never seen these transactions before. I didn't authorize these, yet the transfers originated from your primary business account, the same account Derek Williams had access to as your chief financial officer. His lawyer, Jennifer Park, leaned forward. My client was never informed of these transactions. This is clearly unauthorized access. Detective Johnson laughed. Convenient. Your CFO steals millions. You claim ignorance. And somehow you're the victim. Derek was my brother-in-law. I trusted him. Trust is expensive, Mr. Cole, especially when it costs taxpayers millions in charitable donation fraud. Brandon's phone buzzed. Text from Amara. Baby's healthy. 8 weeks along. Where are you? He typed back. FBI. Explain later. Her response came instantly. Coming to get you. Don't, he texted. Stay home with kids. Agent Martinez noticed his distraction. Something more important than federal charges, Mr. Cole. My family. The family you abandoned 5 years ago, or the family you're using to generate sympathy. Brandon's lawyer grabbed his arm as he started to stand. Don't. You want to know about my family? Brandon's voice was deadly quiet. 5 years ago, I walked away from the best thing that ever happened to me because I was weak. I missed the birth of my children. I missed their first words, first steps, first everything. He leaned forward. So yeah, they're more important than your questions. More important than your charges. More important than anything else in this world. Noble speech, Detective Johnson said. But Noble doesn't explain $2.3 million in missing funds. That's when Jennifer's phone rang. She answered, listened, then smiled for the first time all day. Gentlemen, this interview is over. Excuse me? Agent Martinez frowned. Derek Williams just walked into the Philadelphia field office. He's confessing to everything. Apparently, he's been hiding in a rehab facility for the past 3 weeks, trying to get clean before facing the music. Brandon felt the room tilt. Derek's alive? Very much so. And according to the preliminary report, he's providing detailed records of how he forged your signatures and accessed your accounts without authorization. Detective Johnson's face went red. This doesn't clear your client. Actually, it does. Jennifer gathered her papers. Derek's confession includes security footage from his home office, showing him practicing Mr. Cole's signature. Digital timestamps prove my client was in Atlanta during most of these transactions. Brandon stood on shaky legs. I can go. You can go. Outside the FBI building, Amara was waiting in their rental car, engine running. When Brandon climbed in, she grabbed his face and kissed him hard. Is it over? She asked against his lips. It's over. But as they drove away, neither of them noticed the black sedan following 3 cars behind. Have you ever felt like your past mistakes were catching up with you? Share your story below. Sometimes life doesn't wait for perfect timing. It just happens messy and beautiful and completely out of your control. Amara was laughing at Mason's impression of his kindergarten teacher when the first contraction hit. She gripped the kitchen counter, breathing hard. Mama. Maya looked up from her coloring book. You okay? Fine, baby girl. Just Another contraction. Stronger this time. Brandon, who was helping Luke with homework at the dining table, looked up. Amara. She checked her phone. It's too early. I'm only 28 weeks. We're going to the hospital. Now. But dinner. Maya, Luke, Mason. Brandon's voice carried through their small apartment. Get your shoes. We're going to see where babies come from. The drive to Atlanta General felt like slow motion and warp speed at the same time. Amara's contractions were coming every 3 minutes. In the back seat, Maya held her hand while the boys asked a million questions about why grown-ups make weird breathing noises. Dr. Rachel Chen met them at the emergency entrance. Amara, we're going to try to stop the labor. This baby needs more time. How much time? Brandon asked. Every day counts at this stage. Every hour. They wheeled Amara to the maternity ward, the same floor where she'd worked for years, where colleagues became family, where she'd delivered hundreds of babies but never her own. Nurse Patricia, not the evil mother-in-law Patricia, but the sweet night shift Patricia, squeezed her hand. Girl, what are you doing back here so soon? Apparently having a baby. Well, let's make sure this little one stays put a while longer. The next 6 hours were a blur of medications, monitors, and medical interventions. Brandon held Amara's hand through every contraction, whispering the same words over and over. We've got this. All of us. At 2:17 a.m., their daughter decided she was done waiting. Sophia Cole entered the world weighing 3 pounds, 2 ounces. Tiny but fierce, with a cry that could wake the dead and her father's stubborn chin. She's perfect, Brandon whispered, tears streaming as he watched the NICU team work. She's early, Dr. Chun corrected gently, but her lungs sound strong. Her heart rate is good. She's a fighter, like her mother, Brandon thought. The triplets met their baby sister through the NICU window at sunrise. Maya pressed her face against the glass, mesmerized. She's so little. Were we that small? Luke asked. Smaller, Amara said from her wheelchair. But you all grew up strong and smart and perfect. Mason, still weak from his recent surgery, but determined not to miss this moment, leaned against Brandon's leg. Dad, when can she come home? When she's ready, buddy. Could be weeks. Could be months. That's okay, Mason said solemnly. We'll wait. Families wait for each other. Brandon looked at his son, this brave, beautiful boy who'd almost died just months ago, and felt his heart crack open with love. Yeah, he whispered. Families wait for each other. What's the most patient you've ever had to be for someone you love? Tell us in the comments. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. They wear scrubs, carry casseroles, and show up when family needs them most. The hospital bills arrived like an avalanche. $847,000 for Mason's surgery and recovery. $234,000 for Sophia's NICU stay so far. Derek's legal fees and the embezzlement investigation had drained Brandon's savings. Their insurance covered some of it, but some wasn't enough. Brandon stared at the stack of papers on their kitchen table, doing math that didn't add up no matter how many times he calculated. We're going to lose the apartment, he told Amara quietly. She was pumping breast milk for Sophia's next feeding, their nightly routine now. No, we're not. Amara, be realistic. Even with the charges dropped, my company's reputation is shot. No one wants to hire the CEO who almost went to federal prison. We can't pay rent, utilities, and medical bills. That's when someone knocked on their door. Derek stood in the hallway, looking healthier than he had in months. Sober, clean-shaven, apologetic. Before you slam the door, he said quickly, I have something for you. He handed Brandon a cashier's check. $3.2 million. What is this? Recovery funds. The FBI traced every penny I stole. This covers the missing money plus interest and penalties. Brandon stared at the check. Derek, I also sold my house, my cars, my boat. Everything. It's not enough to fix what I broke, but it's a start. Amara appeared beside Brandon, baby's cries echoing from the nursery. Boys, your sister's awake. Derek's face crumpled when he heard the triplets running toward the bedrooms. I almost destroyed this. Your family, your future, everything. But you didn't, Amara said softly. You came back. You made it right. I got sober. Real sober this time. 90 days clean. Derek's voice was shaky. I want to be the uncle they deserve, if you'll let me. That weekend, Atlanta General Staff threw Sophia a coming home party in the hospital cafeteria. Nurses, doctors, orderlies, cafeteria workers, people who'd watched Amara grow from a new graduate to a seasoned professional, all showed up with gifts, food, and love. Dr. Chun made a speech about families coming in all shapes and sizes. Nurse Patricia, the good one, organized a diaper fund. Even the grumpy security guard, Marcus, brought a stuffed animal. "This is what community looks like," Amara whispered to Brandon as they watched Maya, Luke, and Mason show off their baby sister to anyone who'd listen. Brandon held Sophia against his chest, her tiny hand wrapped around his finger. After all the family drama, legal battles, and medical scares, this moment felt like peace. "I love you," he whispered to Amara. "I know," she smiled. "I love you too." Outside, autumn leaves were falling. Inside, a family was finally coming together. Have you ever experienced unexpected kindness during your hardest moments? Share your story below. 5 years later, some stories end exactly where they're supposed to begin. Maya Cole, age 10, stood at the microphone in Atlanta General's auditorium, her school speech competition medal hanging around her neck. The topic, my hero. My mom says heroes come in all shapes and sizes, but I think heroes are just regular people who decide to do hard things when it matters. In the audience, Amara squeezed Brandon's hand. Sophia, now 5 and fearless, sat on her dad's lap, coloring in a medical textbook. Luke and Mason, 8-year-old twins in everything but birth order, shared a bag of Skittles and whispered commentary about their sister's speech. "My dad walked away from us once," Maya continued, her voice clear and confident. "But he came back. And staying was harder than leaving, because staying meant facing all the mistakes he made." Brandon's throat tightened. Even after 5 years, hearing his failures from his daughter's perspective hit different. "My mom saved lives every day at work, but she also saved our family by teaching us how to forgive. Not the fake kind of forgive where you pretend nothing happened. The real kind, where you choose to love someone even after they hurt you." Amara wiped her eyes. Around them, other parents were crying too. "My Uncle Derek made really bad choices that almost destroyed everything. But he got help, got sober, and now he coaches my soccer team and teaches Luke about computers and tells the best bedtime stories about dragons who learn to apologize." In the back row, Derek grinned and gave a thumbs up. "My baby sister Sophia was born too early and too small, but she grew up strong because she was surrounded by people who refused to give up on her." Sophia looked up from her coloring. "That's me," she whispered loudly, making the audience chuckle. "But my biggest hero is someone most of you don't know. My little brother Mason almost died when he was 3. He needed an operation to save his life. And for weeks, we didn't know if he was going to be okay." Maya's voice wavered slightly. Mason never complained, never cried about being scared. He just smiled and told jokes and made everyone else feel better, even when he was the one who was sick. She looked directly at her family. Heroes aren't people who never get scared. Heroes are people who get scared and do brave things anyway. Like staying when you want to run. Like forgiving when you want to stay angry. Like loving someone even when it's complicated and messy and hard. The auditorium erupted in applause. Maya grinned and waved, then bounded off the stage straight into her family's arms. Later that night, after homework and baths and bedtime stories, Brandon and Amara sat on their back porch, watching Atlanta's skyline twinkle through the darkness. 10 years ago, if someone told me my life would look like this, I wouldn't have believed them, Brandon said. Good different or bad different? Perfect different. Amara curled against his side. Even with all the chaos, the bills, the arguments, the sleepless nights, especially because of all that, Brandon kissed the top of her head. Easy love isn't real love. Real love is choosing each other every single day, even when it's hard. From inside the house, Sophia's voice drifted through the window. "Daddy, I can't sleep." Brandon stood, grinning. "Coming, princess." Because that's what dads do. They show up. What does showing up mean to you? Leave us a comment. We read every single one. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life inspired stories that prove love really can conquer anything.